I just applied for something called the Purpose Prize through AARP. And it was a very long application with lots of questions. And one of their questions said, during the conception of your organization, how many lives have you touched? And so I had to sit down and do some calculations, back to my math, and a very conservative estimate is 1 million people. 1 million people. How the hell did that happen? I taught at Abraham Lincoln High School for approximately 33 years. First day I used to ask my students, how many of you really hate math? And 3/4 of the class would raise their hands. And I'd say, how many of you need us to graduate? And they would all raise their hands. And I'd say, I'm the best thing that ever happened to you, because I can get you through this. I would have them all raise their right hands and say, repeat after me. And they'd raise their right hands. I say, I don't understand. And they'd all say it out loud, I don't. So what are you going to do when you don't understand? I'm going to raise my hand and say, I don't understand. And I will explain it. And that's how we'll get through all this. I had a kid who was a discipline problem in my class. I'd pull him out in the hall, which sounds bad right away. And I would say to him, look, I want you to go home tonight, find a nice quiet place, if you can, sit down, and you think about who you're mad at. Because it's not me. If you have trouble with math, I'll help you with math. You have problems with teachers, parents, we'll try and figure that out. But you can't come to my class and act like this, because it doesn't help you, it doesn't help my class, it doesn't help me. So go home and you figure this out. You come back to me and then we can talk about it. I just realized very early on that if the kids understand that you're compassionate and fair, it works. I used to run science competitions for about 14 junior high schools. Every September I came up with another competition that the science classes had a month to work on. And in October they would come to Lincoln and they would compete. One of my favorites, they would have teams of 6. They would be given an unlimited supply of index cards and 2 staplers. And in 10 minutes, they had to build the highest freestanding tower they could. If it collapsed during that time, they could start over, but they still had to get as far as they could. If it started to get shaky, they could say, stop, and we would measure it. And they had a month to figure out how to do it, and they all did it different ways. So the biggest thing was the block. What was the building block? Was it triangles stapled together? Was it squares? How did you layer them? How did you make it stable? So they had a month to work on this. And then they came. We gave them the staplers, we gave them the index cards, came up on stage, go. And you would watch these towers rise up, and they could get 9 feet high. A lot of people don't like their jobs. They get up in the morning, and I couldn't wait to get to school. I had a really nice dream about my father. Very short. He was outside on my stoop. I had come home. And he kissed me on the cheek. That was it.
Just
Whole thing. My father was an incredibly good man and very generous. If anybody needed anything, anywhere, anytime, he was there. And my mother was also very strong, very protective. And that's just the environment I grew up in. Somehow I thought everybody had that. It wasn't until I got older that I realized that there were people who didn't like their parents, who were unhappy in their home life, who just wanted to get out of their homes. Never occurred to me. I was a champion swimmer my whole life. And every year the camp, there were two swim meets. There was a swim meet that the whole camp went to compete against the other camps, maybe 25 camps all in one meet. And there was a meet at the Grashow Hotel that only two of us went to. And I think the age limit was 15 years old. And I always represented my camp because I was the fastest, but I never won. I always came in second. And this was my last year to enter this swim meet. Well, the Island Lake swim meet and the Grashow meet came out on the same day. And the camp wanted me to go to the camp swim meet, because I would represent them better and they would do better. I definitely didn't want to do that. I wanted to go win a trophy for myself. And so they called my parents and asked my parents to weigh in and push me to go to the camp swim meet. And so they called me and I spoke to them, and in the end, they left it up to me. They said, you decide, what you think is in your best interest and the camp's best interest, and whatever you decide is fine. So in the end, I decided to go to the camp swim meet. The day of the meet, it rained. So they canceled or postponed the camp swim meet, but Grashow was indoors. So I went to that.
And?
I won. I got a free pass. I made the right decision, and then I got full credit for everything, and I still won a trophy. So there you go. After 34 years, I was now almost 57 or something like that. A lot of the teachers that I loved and had been weaned on and who I learned my craft from, they had moved on, retired. And my principal had just left. And the new principal was coming in, and I wasn't impressed by him. And also the Department of Education was changing how you taught. And I also didn't like how that was going to impact on my style of teaching. So in my family, we say that God doesn't send telegrams. You have to read the signs. So the signs were all pointing to, this is enough. You've done this, you've done it great, but maybe there's something else. A guy named Paulo de Souza, and he was born and raised in Zambia, and his sister was getting married in Zambia, and he invited Sherry and myself to the wedding. Well, Sherry and I pretty much never say no to going anywhere. So we went to this wedding in Zambia, which was very nice, and an elephant attended the wedding. And after the wedding, my son had done work in Zimbabwe, had connections in Zimbabwe, and we wanted to see Victoria Falls. And so we went there and we met some of his friends, and they took us to visit 3 schools that were way off road, maybe an hour and a half off any paved highway. Very poor schools. If they had a library, maybe it had 20 books in it. They had very few, they had no pens, they had pencils, probably no crayons, no toys, no soccer balls. So even though these kids were bright and wanted to learn, the things they needed just weren't there. Lincoln High School had a 40-foot container behind it, a dumpster, where everything they didn't want was thrown in. And every day for 30 some odd years, I'd walk past that dumpster, look in that dumpster, And there could be hundreds of math books, library books, sneakers, desks, sports equipment, every day. It just made no sense. And finally, here was a place they could go. In addition to these 3 schools, they had 32 others that they were trying to help. Well, me being so active a teacher, working with elementary schools, middle schools, other high schools, a piece of cake to find 35 schools. More than happy to give up this stuff. Well, we had to become a 501c3. I had no clue how to begin to do that. Sherry did all of that. She got all the applications, she got all the documents, she did all our taxes, she did all our communications, she did all our thank yous, and we had to pick a name, and that's not easy to do. Every name you pick is already taken. So we ultimately became the U.S.Africa Children's Fellowship. And at that time, the movie Fellowship of the Rings came out. I said, man, that has a nice fellowship, sounds like a nice, name. A 40-foot container full weighs about 40,000 pounds. So you don't pick it up. What you do is you take everything out of it and you put it into another 40-foot container that's sitting on the back of a flatbed truck. Well, this seemed easy enough until we realized that a truck with a flatbed container on it can't make the turn into the driveway. So we had to physically take each box out of our container and transport it about 100 yards. And that wasn't easy. They will arrive at my site with the 40-foot empty high cube container, back it up next to the full one. And I usually get about 20 high school students from various Brooklyn Tech, Stuyvesant, Midwood, all over. And they will, in about 2.5 hours, pass the boxes, along and onto dollies and tables, sliding them and filling the 40-foot container. We will close the doors, seal it. It goes to Elizabeth, New Jersey. A crane will pick that one up and put it on a ship. And it goes, and now I have an empty container, and I start all over again. 35 schools became 75 schools in Zimbabwe, receiving. And then it became, as I shipped another container, it became 175 schools. And it kept getting more and more and more. And to this day now, I think 500 schools. It was not politically correct to be shipping to Zimbabwe. A lot of people came to me and objected, saying, look, you got Robert Mugabe there, who was a dictator and is really brutal, and suppresses, a lot of the population. Why support such a government? In fact, I had a guy when I started shipping to South Africa, and he was paying for my shipments. He was paying for the containers to go to schools in South Africa. He basically demanded that I cut off my relationship with Zimbabwe, or he would cut off my support, his support. And I said, okay, you stop the corruption in South Africa first, and then I'll stop shipping to Zimbabwe. And we parted company very quickly. During my presentations to schools, and the presentation would be to 3 classes in one classroom on the floor. It could be in a library with 4 or 5 classes, or it could be in an auditorium with 600 students. I say, okay, you live in an African village, you live in a hut, it's maybe, 8 feet across, has a thatched roof. and you sleep on a mat on the floor, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and somebody's waking you up. First I say, so who's waking? Well, I say, why are they waking you up at 4 o'clock in the morning? And we figure out that you have to walk 8 miles to school. And I say, who's waking you up? And most of them will say, my mother or my father. Well, you say that there was a lot of AIDS in Africa, and your parents have passed away. You're living with your grandparents. And you say, okay, so you get up, what do you put on? And you talk about, some kids will say, an animal skin. But you say you need a school uniform to go to school. And they say, okay, you get up, so you have breakfast. What's for breakfast? And a lot of these kids have no breakfast because there's not enough food. So you establish all this in a discussion. And then you say, okay, you're ready to go to school. And I pick a kid out of the audience, and I call him up. And I said, this is your best friend. He lives in the next hut. His name is Mamezi. And you've grown up together. You're inseparable. He can't go with you. And he's smart. And he's healthy. And he wants to go to school. He desperately wants to go to school with you. Why can't he go? Money. You have to pay tuition. You have to buy a uniform. And you have to buy a notebook and a pencil. So that's one. 2, you have to work. Maybe there's a farm. Maybe you have to get wood. But maybe there's a small business or something, cattle. But you have to work. 3, you're a caretaker. Maybe your mother is sick. Maybe your mother's dying. And you have to be there to take care of her. Or you have a young child in the house that somebody has to take care of. So you have to stay behind. And the 4th reason, you have no shoes. It's really cold. And you have to walk 8 miles in the cold to get there. And then when you finish that, you say, okay, we're here again. How are you going to help Mamezi? What are you going to do for Mamezi? And then they say, we'll give him our shoes. We'll give him a pencil. We'll give him a pen. We'll give him this. We'll give him that. And you establish some connectivity between the students in America and the lives in Africa. If I go to a school and a grandmother is waiting there for 3 hours because we were late arriving, only to thank us for giving her granddaughter shoes and a book. I mean, that's pretty gratifying. To give little kids sneakers that light up, and when they put them on, they run around like, chickens running around. It's just magic. Absolute favorite story. Go to a school in northern Zimbabwe just to visit one of our schools. I don't visit all the schools. There are 500 of them, but, whenever I can. And I met a skinny old guy, a nice guy, and got to talking, and he's a teacher. And I said, so what do you teach? Oh, I teach English. Oh, very nice. And he says, well, as a matter of fact, I teach Shakespeare. Well, that was a surprise. And he wears a jacket like all teachers, male teachers in Zimbabwe, and he reaches inside his coat pocket and pulls out a copy of Romeo and Juliet. And it's a wreck, right? The cover's fallen off, the pages are all loose. And he shows it to me. He says, this is what I teach from. It's the only copy I have. I talk about, read the different, acts, and we talk about the characters, but nobody can touch this because it's so fragile and so important to me. That morning, before I met him, I was in town going through one of my shipments that had arrived, and just randomly going through it, opening up a box here and there. Most of them are labeled, but not all of them. Open up a box, 50 copies of Romeo and Juliet. Not Hamlet, not King, Romeo and Juliet, the exact same thing that this guy was teaching. So I go back into town, I get the box, and I come back the next day, and I see him. I said, come on over. And he comes over, I said, I brought you a present. He looks at me, hands him the box, opens the box, looks at me again, and just starts crying. And several times he tries to talk. He could not get the words out of his mouth. And finally took the box and walked off. And I've never seen him since. I never saw him again. Never had another conversation with him. But it made me really happy. And it, I'm sure it changed him, changed how he could teach and how the kids would learn. And the box was Romeo and Juliet. People did not want to give money to support us because we were in Zimbabwe. So it made sense for USACF to expand outside of Zimbabwe. A friend of mine knew an American that had married a man from Ghana and was running a program for schools in Ghana. Could I meet her? If there's ever listening to this, don't call me up because I'll let you come and visit me. So he said, can you go see her? And so I said, sure, no problem. So on the way home from Zimbabwe, I stopped in Ghana and got to talk to her. She asked, can I ship them a container? Oh, sure, why not? So we started shipping to them. We were in Bill Clinton's book, Giving. He wrote a book called Giving, and it was about how people, rich and poor, can help other people. And there's about a page on us in there. And unfortunately, or fortunately, people read his book and called me up. And so I got a call from a guy from Tanzania who was an accountant in the South Bronx, and said, my father is the chief of a village in western Tanzania, near the Malawi border, and he has 35 schools, same number, coincidentally, as Zimbabwe. Can I talk to you? Can I come and see you? Sure, why not? So he came to this very table, and we sat down, and started talking, and we started shipping to Tanzania. This had a life of its own, and to this day, it still has a life of its own. I'm driving home in my car from somewhere and listening to NPR, and there's someone on the radio talking about the One World Play Project. And that is a project underwritten by Chevrolet, where they will send a 40-foot container full of nothing but soccer balls, nothing else, just boxes and boxes of soccer balls, 6,500 to be exact, to third world countries. So I got home and Googled them and found them and emailed them and said, this is what we do, can I get a container? So I waited about 3 days and I got an email back, and it's very short, one sentence, and it said, why do you want only one container? Okay. So we wrote back, and eventually they shipped 3 40-foot containers to Zimbabwe, which was over 17,000 soccer balls. And parallel to this, I became friends with Super Soccer Stars. And that's a for-profit organization in the greater New York area that runs soccer teaching programs for kids from 3 up through high school. We got to talking, and I said, so why don't you send some of your coaches to Zimbabwe? I said, okay. And what it ended up being is they would send up to 4 coaches every June and run a 5-day workshop for 60 teachers in 60 different schools. And now the teachers know how to run drills. And there was a whole soccer program came out of that. And we eventually established a soccer tournament in Bulawayo, where 16 schools from all over Zimbabwe came, 8 girls teams and 8 boys teams, and competed. And at the end we gave a trophy and a few prizes to the winning team. Toys is huge. During my presentations to schools, I said, I will now show you how you can be a superhero and how anybody in this room can save 20 kids. And I reach down and I pick up a box and I put it on the podium. And I said, this is a box, and there are things in this box. And I brought a similar box to a school in Zimbabwe, to a kindergarten. And I gave it to the teacher, and I said, this is for you, enjoy it, and I left. And I came back about a year later, same school, walk in the class, 40 kids in the class. So I say to the kids in the audience, so what happened? How come there's 20 kids and now there's 40? And the only change is the box. Nothing else is different between when I arrived the first time and the second time, except me delivering this box. So I say, what's in the box? I opened up the box and I start pulling out toys. And it could be action figures, it could be trucks, it could be toys that talk, toys that light up, it could be Play-Doh, it can be Lego, a wide variety of toys. In this school, they had one toy when I arrived. They had a ball wrapped in tape, and that was it. They had no other toys. Well, once the kids around started talking to their friends about this toy that lights up, this and that, it attracted other kids, and it literally doubled the size. So what I do in the presentation is I'll stand up a single child in the auditorium, and I say, if everybody here does nothing, but this one person goes home, gets a box, and fills it up with, toys they no longer play with, or their friends' toys, and fill this box up, and gives it to me, and I can bring it to another school that has no toys, they can be a superhero. Blackboards. Blackboards are a huge bonus or plus. If a school gets a blackboard, it's like getting a new classroom. They just put it outside, and they can teach outside. And a lot of our countries don't have bad rainy seasons, so they can teach outside most of the year. I certainly want to expand the bridge pie. If you take this device, and again, size of my hand, and bring it into an empty room virtually anywhere in Africa or anywhere in the world, and bring in 15 tablets, laptops, cell phones, up to 50 of them can access everything in this device at the same time. The teacher can put in their own exams, their own lesson plans if they want. It also comes with a projector. You don't even have to have laptops. You can project a lesson on the wall, and everybody could learn from that lesson that the teacher wants to do. So overnight, you can take an empty classroom and it can be a digital learning center. And it's not expensive. A bridge pie costs $100. A laptop that's suitable for connection can be $90. And the kids in that room, on their own, can research the human body, can research the oceans. That teacher who taught Romeo and Juliet, all of Shakespeare's in there. That teacher, if he had a bridge pie and a projector, could teach Hamlet, could teach King Lear, and doesn't need me for a second to ship a single other thing, as long as he owns that. I was married to Sherry very happily for almost 50 years. She had a lot of struggles. She had a 10-year bout with cancer, and we fought it for about 10 years, and passed away last February, a year ago, February. And, you know, I've had other personal tragedies. I had a sister who died at 41. I had a daughter-in-law who died at 38. And I've learned that if you would like to do something in a person's memory, meaningful, do a thing that is durable. And for my family, my children and I, my wife was a lifelong quilter. Made quilts for every occasion, you know, anniversaries, babies, weddings, block party, raffles, and very generous, and they were wonderful. And to honor her memory, what started out was, let's find a place where women can come and make quilts. Let's do that in her memory. Over the last 3 years, we've been getting more and more involved in Sierra Leone and creating schools and involved with children of amputees. So we decided to tell all our friends that we were going to build a craft center in Sierra Leone where people could come and quilt. 5 years ago, we worked with MIT architectural department to design a classroom block for schools in South Africa, in Eastern Cape, which they did, a 60-page book. That was never built for reasons I won't go into. But we had these designs. Let's use these designs. So we sent out the word that this is what we want to do, and Sherry had lots of family, lots of friends, and we got way more money than we anticipated. So rather than just have a quilting center, now we're having a craft center where people would learn to make clothing, they would learn to do batiks, they would do tie-dyeing, they would do jewelry making, they would learn IT, and we would build another classroom where people could do the bridge pie. And we would have a full library. So now there would be 3 buildings. We gave the plan back to MIT, and they redesigned the plan for Sierra Leone, which has a different, serious rainy season. And I'm speaking at the end of February 2022. And next week, I think we may put shovels on the ground and start building this thing. We have formed 2 advisory committees on the ground in Masaka, where this will be built. One of all women, because we want to empower women specifically, and one of leading community members. And they will work with us, telling us what they want. And we will try to do the best we can to fulfill that. Sierra Leone had a brutal civil war where a lot of people lost legs and arms, you know, and have been basically without prosthetics since the Civil War ended. I'm talking about some of them have 20 years without limbs. We've been working with MIT, and they are going to build a prosthetics clinic. Well, they make prosthetics with 3D printers and other latest technology. They will also have 3 mobile clinics, which will go across the country to get out to the amputees because they can't travel very well, and measure them for prosthetics and make the prosthetics and fit them for prosthetics. Once this is done, what happens to these people? they've been beggars, a lot of them, certainly not all of them, but many of them, for 20 years. And now, do they go back to begging? Or do they learn a skill? And if we're building the center where we're teaching skills, why not bring them in? So, we will at some point negotiate with MIT to establish some sort of bridge where someone who has received their prosthetics will come to our center, and they would have to live there. There's no way they could travel back and forth, and we would teach them some skill that they wanted to learn and obviously were capable of learning. This is the king of serendipitous moments. This will be proved to be extraordinary. I have been working with a guy named Sheku Mansouri, who is from Sierra Leone, and who at the age of 12, both of his parents were killed, and the rebels cut off both of his forearms. And for 5 years, from the age of 12 to 17, he could not hold a spoon, he could not feed himself, he could not button a button, he literally could not take care of himself, and his uncle took care of him. At the age of 17, he came to America with a number of other children, amputees. And they received prosthetics, and none of their parents, those of them that had parents, wanted them to come back to a civil war, to a very limited life. So Sheku settled in Staten Island, went to college, became a paralegal, and he developed a nonprofit called Hands on Sierra Leone, which pays the school fees for children of amputees. So I was working with Sheku quite a bit, and it came a time where I decided, we should go up to MIT and meet with the class working on the design for this. And Sheku would come with me and talk to the class. Separate from this, we learned that MIT did have a prosthetics team that was one of the best in the country. And there was one guy there named Herr, H-U-G-H, Herr, H-E-R-R, that was involved in prosthetics and the creation of prosthetics. We tried to set up a meeting with this guy, Herr. Unable to do that. Meeting never happened. So Sheku and I went up to MIT, met with the class, met with the teachers, and one of the teachers of the class decided to take us on a tour of MIT. And there's a section of MIT called Media Lab, where all the sort of the cutting edge research takes place. So we were in Media Lab, John, myself, and Sheku in the first floor, and there were 3 people trying to get into the building with a swipe card. They couldn't get in. So we said, well, let's let them in. So we let them in, and it turns out to be Herr and 2 women who work in his lab. Well, they come in. Herr himself is a double leg amputee. He was a rock climber and fell and was in snow, and over a course of days had frostbite and lost both of his legs. And immediately gets interested in Sheku with his 2 hooks. Where you're from, how useful are your prosthetics, and this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. They get to talking about Sierra Leone. The 3 people, Herr and the 2 women, had just come from another building, from another meeting. They had met with, 1, the president of Sierra Leone, 2, a minister of education of Sierra Leone, and 3, a woman who wants to donate $25 million to MIT to create prosthetics clinics around the world. And we walked smack into them. Had we come 15 minutes earlier, 15 minutes later, had they been able to get into the building? So again, I don't know about God and his telegrams, but something was happening in this room. It was stunning. And we got to talking a lot. It became clear that Sheku was a tremendous resource for MIT. So when we went in December, 2 of their team came with us. So we traveled with them, we visited clinics, we visited the polio clinics, and we've spoken to you about, these vocational training for amputees, after they get their prosthetics, and, we'll see, and it just happened. Nobody was planning this, it just came together, and, then you plan. That's the joy. I am incredibly lucky, and again, I get enormous joy and pleasure out of all this, but I believe that while I get this joy, I am changing lives to the giver and the recipient, both. They're undergoing, hopefully, some transformation. If I can make people cry, which I can sometimes, that's a person who is absorbing what they're hearing and making it personal and understanding it. When I was 8 years old, my school took me to the Brooklyn Museum to learn about music and musical instruments and orchestras. And they taught me about the woodwinds and the percussions and the brass and orchestras and the conductor. And I came away believing that the conductor was the guy who could not play an instrument, so they gave him a stick. And he would stand there, but everybody had the music, they know what to play, so he would go like this and they would play. I had no respect at all for the conductor. Years and years and years later, I'm talking a lot of years later, I had taken one of my classes to Austria, to Vienna, and they took us to a music museum. And one of the exhibits in the museum is you would stand at a podium, and projected in front of you was an orchestra, and you had a baton. When you moved your hand, music played, and when you moved your hand differently, different music played. So as you moved back and forth, you became the music. Literally, you were it. You were the instrument. You created all of these sounds. And I said, that's what a conductor does. He creates the music. And in this application, I said, now that I'm 76 years old, I have become the conductor. And every person that I've known in my life are my instruments. And when a new idea comes along, I assemble my orchestra and we play.